Today we're going to continue solving polynomial equations. My first step in solving these polynomial equations is to get 0 on one side of the equal sign. So here I'm going to move this 36u squared to the other side, so I'm going to subtract 36u squared. I'm going to subtract 36u squared. That's gone, it's equal to 0, so I'm now left with u to the fourth minus 36u squared equals 0. So now the equation has 0 on one side, you need to factor the other side. So I notice that these two terms share a u squared. So I'm going to factor by greatest common factor. I'm going to take out a u squared, so I'm left with a u squared for the first term minus 36, and that is still equal to 0. Now I notice this right here is a difference of squares, so I know I can factor that. So this u squared is going to stay out front, and I'm left with u plus 6 times u minus 6. That's all equal to 0. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is, to make sure I get all of my solutions to this, I'm going to take this u squared and just write it as u times u, and then copy the rest down. U plus 6 times u minus 6. And that's now equal to 0. Now, the next step is I need to set each piece of the left side here equal to 0 and solve it. So I'm going to set this equal to 0, u equals 0, set this equal to 0, u equals 0, set this equal to 0, u plus 6 equals 0, and then set this equal to 0. Now I just solve each equation. That's already solved. That's already solved. Here I'm just going to subtract 6 from both sides, and I get u equals negative 6. And here I'm going to add 6. Here I'm going to add 6, and I get u equals 6. Okay, my final answer, I need to write with the squiggles or the braces. So I got 0 is a double root, so I'm going to let everybody know that by putting 0 and then double root behind it, and then negative 6 and positive 6 are all my solutions to this equation. So right here, this is the solution to this equation. In this second example, example B, we need to start by doing the same thing we did in example A. We need to get one side set equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 8y, and over here I'm going to subtract 8y. Now I'm going to rewrite that equation as 15y squared minus 8y plus 1 equals 0. So one side set equal to 0. Now what I need to do is I need to factor this. Okay, you can factor it by the guess and check method or the AC method, depending on which way you prefer. Okay, I'm going to do the guess and check here real quick. And I know that from that right there, both signs are the same and both signs are negative. And it works out that you're going to have 5y times 3y will give you that 15y squared. And then you'll just need a 1 and a 1 here. And then that is factor. Now, the next step is, after I have that left side factor there, I need to set each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So I'm going to do 5y minus 1 equals 0, and I'm going to do 3y minus 1 equals 0. So I'm going to add 1 over here, add 1 over here. I have 5y equals 1, divide by 5. Divide by 5, and from this one I get y equals 1/5. Now on the other equation here, it's almost the exact same thing. You're going to add 1, and you now have 3y equals 1. You're going to divide by 3, and you get y equals 1/3. Once again, we're going to write this, our answer, in the braces. So I have my two answers right there. So I'm going to put them in the braces, and I have y is 1/5 from over here, and I have y is 1/3 from over there. Okay, so these two numbers are the solutions to the equation above. In example C here, we need to do the same thing as we did before. We need to make one side equal to 0. It's best to keep this squared term positive so we can factor it easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this positive 4m to the other side. So I'm going to have a minus 4m. And then I'm going to move this 12 to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 12 and subtract 12. And my new equation is going to be 0 equals m squared minus 4m minus 12. Now I have one side set equal to 0, so now I just need to do what I did before. I need to factor this, so I'm going to do guess and check again. So to get this m squared right there, I'm going to do m times m. This tells me that the signs are different, so one's positive, one's negative. The factors of 12 that go to 4 are going to be positive 2 and negative 6. So that is now factored. Now, just like before, I need to set each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So I'm just going to set that equal to 0 and set that equal to 0 and solve it. So subtract 2, m equals negative 2, add 6, and I get m equals 6. So I am left with my final answer. I have a solution of negative 2 and a solution of 6. So those two numbers are the solutions to the equation above. In letter D here, we're going to begin the same way by making one side 0. So I'm going to subtract this 40, and over here I'm going to subtract this 40. Now, after I do that, I have a plus 3 times a minus 3 minus 40 equals 0. Now, since this 40 is not inside the parentheses, I'm going to have to FOIL this right here. So I'm going to FOIL it. So I'm going to do a times a is a squared. A times negative 3 is negative 3a. 3 times a is 3a. And then 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. Minus 40 equals 0. So now, after I have that, these two are opposite, so cancel, cancel. And then I can combine these two right here. And I get a squared, and then minus 49 equals 0. Now I notice right here, this a squared minus 49, okay, is a difference of squares. So I know it factors to a plus 7 times a minus 7. Set that equal to 0. Now the left side is factored, so after it's factored, you set that equal to 0, and you set this equal to 0, and you solve each one. So you're going to subtract 7, you get a equals negative 7. You're going to add 7, and you get a equals a positive 7. So I factored it, I set each one equal to 0 and solved it. So after I do that, I'm going to just write my answer in the little squiggles here, or the braces, and I get a negative 7 and 7 as my answer. Alright, on the next one here, it's going to be very similar to the last one. Okay, I need to get one side set equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract c. It's gone, that side's 0, and subtract c. Now I have c minus 6 squared minus c equals 0. Okay, once again, this is not in the parentheses, so I can't set each one equal to 0 yet and solve it. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to write this c minus 6 out as c minus 6 times c minus 6 minus c equals 0. Now, once again, I'm going to have to FOIL, so I get a c squared minus 6c minus 6c plus 36 minus c equals 0. Okay, so now I have it multiplied out, and now I just need to combine like terms. So the like terms I have here are these two negative 6c's and this negative c. So I would get c squared minus 13c plus 36 equals 0. Now I know I'm going to factor that, so I'm going to factor it. I have both signs are the same, both signs are negative, so I have c minus times c minus. The factors of 36 that get me to 13 are 4 and 9. That's still set equal to 0. And now, once it's factored, once again, we just need to set each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So I have c minus 4 equals 0, and c minus 9 equals 0. Add 4. Add 4. You get c equals 4. And then add 9. Add 9. c equals 9. So I have c equals 4 and c equals 9. So my final answer, use the braces here, I have 4, 9. So those are the two solutions to this equation. In this final example, we're going to use the same technique we used last time. We're going to get one side equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 6x. Subtract 6x. I now have x squared times x minus 1 minus 6x equals 0. Now, once again, this minus 6x is not in the parentheses, so I can't set it equal to 0 and solve it yet. So I'm going to have to distribute this first part here. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 1 is negative x squared. And then I have minus 6x equals 0. Okay. So after I have that, I need to factor this left side right here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and factor that. So I notice that each term has an x in it. So I'm going to pull out a greatest common factor of an x. So I have x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to 0. Okay, it's almost factored. Now I can factor this. Remember, there's really a 1 right here. So I'm going to factor it. I'm going to have x times x to get the x squared. Now this tells me right here that the signs are going to be different. The factors of 6 that get me to negative 1 are 2 and 3. And don't forget this x is out front there. So now it's factored. So now, once again, the final step on all of these is once I have it factored, I'm going to set each piece equal to 0 and solve. So I have x equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, and then x minus 3 equals 0. Now I solve it. That's already solved. X is all alone, so I'm going to subtract 2, and I get x is negative 2. And then I'm going to add 3, and I get x is positive 3. So my final answer in the braces here, I'm going to have x is negative 2, x is 0, and x is 3. So once again, there are all of my solutions. Yesterday, I assigned page 196, 1 through 20. Today, let's add on to that, page 196. Let's do 21 through 28. So altogether, tomorrow, what's due is going to be page 196, 1 through 28. If you have any questions, I'll be there Friday morning So you can ask them or you can ask them in class.